Please tell me your full name and when and where you were born.
My name is Victor Lee Edwards. I was born in Fort Hamilton Hospital. My first home, though, was in Oxford, Ohio. 163 Elm Street, Oxford, Ohio. I was taken to when I was an infant.
Do you have any family members that are serving or have served in the military?
I have 15 members that have served, four brothers, I believe 4 nephews, 5 great nephews. And there's another one in there. Well, myself included is 15 altogether, I guess, yeah. And that's in all the branches except Coast Guard, Navy, Air Force, Army, and Marine Corps.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
I was a college student at the University of the Cumberlands now. It was Cumberland College at the time. I had been there 3 years. I was drifting. I was not focused. And also I had a premonition that I was going to go to Vietnam while I was there. And I'd flunked out at the University of Houston, Texas, gone home to the farm for a while, was getting ready to be drafted a second time, and I went to Cumberland and was on and off probation for 3 years there. Had a great time. The rivers and streams and outdoors were fabulous, but I could not focus and function. And so I had this dream in October, and in December I got a notice to take a physical for the Army, and the letter said that I would be after the physical that I would be drafted in June. And so I started looking for a way out. But I had run all of these years from that responsibility, and there was no place to go. And I happened to run into a boyhood friend who was home on leave from Navy, and he recommended that I join the Navy. And so I figured the Navy was the lesser of 4 evils. The Air Force was flying over, the Marine Corps was right in the middle of it, and the Army was there as well. Navy had to be on a boat somewhere. And so I decided to join the Navy, and that's when I found out what a Navy corpsman was. A Navy corpsman is a medic for the Marines in the jungle of Vietnam. I became a medic or a corpsman. So I went to the Navy boot camp and to hospital corps school. And I jumped from the frying pan right into the fire.
Can you tell me what happened when you departed for boot camp and during the early days of training?
Yes. It was in January. I got on a plane at Cincinnati airport and flew to O'Hare Field. It was snowing so much that we were on a holding pattern for an hour. And finally, there was one runway cleared, and we came down on that one way. There was piles of snow everywhere, and we made it. It wasn't really bad at all. And so we went in, and then waited until midnight. There was a whole bunch of us recruits that were there. We waited until midnight, and then a bus from the Navy Recruiting Center at Great Lakes, Illinois, came and picked us up and took us in. And so when we got there, they were screaming and yelling at us to get off, and just a lot of chaos in the midst of darkness. And so we just waited to see what was going to happen. They finally got us in I can't hardly remember much except I think we went through and was issued clothes. Everything was at least a size too big for me, I remember. And so there was a lot of chaos, and then we got up not too long after we got to bed and started the routine. And the routine was to get up about 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm pretty sure, and then go to chow. And it was, I remember, hurry up, eat up, and get out. And I've always been slow at most everything, and it took me a while, but I did get into the routine. So the key thing was you get up and get dressed and fall in line, and then go to PT, which is physical training. And we had to do that inside most of the time because snow was high all over the base, and it was really kind of dangerous to even walk, even though it had been spread. It had been kind of cleaned somewhat. And I remember the food wasn't really that good. And one thing I really hated was SOS, which was a derogatory term for chipped beef and gravy on toast, I believe it was. I never liked it. But some people wanted to learn how to fix it and eat it later. I remember a lot of people really loved it, but I did not. So the routine, it was always rush here and rush there. Everything was double time. So we were always really close. It get us in totally close formation, almost touching each other. And then we'd do double time from one place to the other all the time. We were fitted with a wool blouse and also the wool pants and blouse. It was wintertime. And some people were allergic to wool, and so they would have to have stuff especially lined, and they would line them with silk, or I think it was silk at the time, but I didn't have any allergies. But at any rate, so everything was double time, and then you went and got your shots. Everybody lined up in shots. I have a book and I never thought about it at all, and I should have, because I don't know where it is, but it's actually a yearbook of my company going through boot camp, and it shows all the things that we did. I hadn't thought about it until just now for a long time, so I'll have to find out which packing case it's in, I guess. But there's pictures of us getting shots, going through the chow line. The different things that we did. We had classroom. We were learning everything about being a sailor and rules. We had the the Blue Jackets manual, which was the manual that we were to go by. Everything about the laws and the rules and regulations was in that. But we went to different classes, and so all of that. It was just a routine, and you had to memorize. I can't remember just what it was, but I had it down then. They'd ask you a question about whatever it is that you were supposed to know from that book, and if you didn't have it, you had to give them 50 push-ups, or something like that. If you were bad enough, they would go to happy hour, and happy hour was PT, and it was an hour of intense physical training. I didn't like to go to happy hour, but I was really capable of doing anything physical. First of all, I was about 7 years older than most of the guys that were there. I was 25 when I went in. I had been able to evade the draft for quite a while. And so I was 25, but also I had been on the judo team at Cumberland. And so I was in very good physical shape. I could do anything anybody could do. And in fact, I was a squad leader. I led a squad of guys like myself in PT and just a whole bunch of other stuff. That was always fun to me. It was not bad. But anyway, we had that, and that was always a punishment. And I remember one experience of going. We had inspections all the time too. They inspected the barracks. The barracks was it had 40 men in the barracks, and that was my company. And so there were 40 men in my company, and I had a sister company in another barracks just across the way from us, like that. And so we had, and it was just bare bunk beds, and they were metal bunk beds with a little thin mattress and the navy blankets, gray, and a sheet, I think, or so. And so we had to keep that. That had to be totally tight, and when we made the bed up, it had to be just right. We had just a little bit of a locker to put all of our stuff in. And so we had to learn how to pack and how to put stuff in there. And it had to be done just so. And if it wasn't done just so, they would throw it all out. The bed wasn't just so, they would tear it all out. And you'd have to go back and do it again. And it's called a hit for everything that they find. And with so many hits on it, you had so much that you had to do, or days to spend at happy hour. So I was pretty sharp on that. I mean, I was able to do that. First of all, being 25 years old, I had been through college twice. And so I was able to do rules and regulations. Also, I had a great mother, and there were 9 kids in the family. So I learned so much from my mother in how to do things. I cooked. I learned to cook from her. I learned to clean house from her. I just and do washings. I used to go with her. We had to go to a laundromat, to wash clothes, and I would go with Mom to laundromat, and I would watch her as she washed clothes and help her fold them and go back. Those were special moments, that at the time they may have seemed a chore. I don't remember any of the other kids doing that, but I did that. And so, and one time, Mother said to me, "Son, you're going to make some woman a really good wife." But it has helped, it's helped me. My philosophy is that a gentleman can do anything. He can cook for himself. He can make his own bed. He can wash his own clothes. It doesn't hurt him to clean the house or do the dishes. No, these are all things that a man can do and doesn't have to have somebody waiting on him hand and foot all the time. When that happens, usually the kids will take after the dad, and they expect Mom to do the same thing, and she'll find herself doing the same thing for the sons, and they go out just as ignorant as their dad was, and just as presumptuous. That's my philosophy. So, at any rate, but anyway, I learned all those things, and those were all the routines and things we did. But two memories from that boot camp situation was we had smoke break. It was called the smoking fire is lit. When the smoking fire is lit, we got buckets of water, half full of water, around a bunch of guys, and they would pull out cigarettes and smoke until it was over, and put their butts out in the water, teaching safety at that, But and I did smoke at that time, and so but I remember we had one young man. He was 17 years old, from Providence, Rhode Island. The kid just couldn't do anything. He could not do anything. And you get all kinds of flags for cleanliness, for efficiency, how you do stuff, how your barracks looks, how you dress, how you do in inspections. And this kid, we just had to just about dress him and everything. He's right next, a precious lad, loving lad, very quiet all the way through. But he had a pair of boots that would not polish. We had to spit shine our shoes. And you spit shine them with spit and polish, and it is spit and polish, and they have to have a really good shine on them. At that time, pictures were taken with a new Polaroid. That when the picture came out, you had to take this glossy thing and run over it in order to preserve the picture and protect it. And it would go over wet, and then it would dry like a glossy picture. Well, this lad, the leather was faulty. It would not shine. So I remember when we we're going to go to inspection this one day. We had done everything we could to get his shoes to shine, and they didn't work. They didn't work. So I remembered that glossy on my Polaroid, and I went and took that little thing and I polished his shoes with that, and they shine just like or better than my own from the spit shine. But so we went, and he got through the inspection, and when we got back through the inspection, the stuff on his shoes was flaking off. It was starting to flake off, but fortunately it held. Another time, and I was always sure to make sure that everything was right. You had to be shaved so close that they could not see any little stuff. And if it reflected on it, you got a hit for not being shaved. And of course, our haircuts were all high and tight, just really buzzed. Actually, they were buzzed. And so, so I went, and it was the winter, as I said, in January or February somewhere. We got there in January, graduated in April. But so I was a squad leader, so I stood at the at the end of my line of men. So when they came through, you stand with your weapon by your side. They called it a piece. You didn't call it a gun. If you called it a gun, you had to sleep with it. But they called it a piece, and it was an M1 look-alike. So I had a pea coat on it, and it's a big wool coat with the big buttons on it. I still have it somewhere. It's kind of ratty right now because that was 1968. So, but so when they came by, and I had my hand in. I did not have my hand in my pocket. I had my hand at my side this way and standing at attention, and the weapon at my side, or the piece at my side. And so the guy that was coming through inspecting looked at my piece, gave it back to me, and then put his hand in my pocket to see if I had anything in my pocket. And I didn't have anything in my pocket, and I passed it perfectly. But when I got back to the room, to the barracks, I started to take off my pea coat. I put my hand in my left pocket, and I had a whole packet of matches. And there's 20 matches in a packet, so I would have got 20 hits for the matches and a hit for the packet itself. And he didn't do that. And I thought, man, I would have been sunk if he had got that, but he didn't catch it. So, and one other thing, we would go to what they called a Quonset hut. They were big round things that you see a lot of farmers have hay and stuff in today. But the Quonset huts, and actually at Camp Lejeune earlier, they had a lot of those. You'll see those in the Andy of Marybeer movies where the one goes to the Marine Corps. Then he had his own place, but they were Quonset huts. So we would go in there and work out and do PT. And so I was lined up. I was over here, and another lad was over here, and we were doing jumping jacks. And when he did jumping jacks, his jumper came out, and a cigarette and a pack of matches fell out on the floor. I don't know what happened to him. In fact, I don't remember seeing him again. I think he may have been set back actually because of that. Set back means that you go back a week and start over. You go back and start over from where you were. And so for 12, 18, 12 weeks, I guess, is a long time anyway. But what it is, it's a whole thing to get you to not be an individual, but be a part of a unit and to act in concert with everybody else around you. And it takes a while to do that when you have kids from Ohio and Kentucky and Tennessee and other places that are coming together to do something like that. They're from different cultures, different backgrounds, different ways of doing things. And then you got to have precision marching, precision everything, and everything has to be spot on immediately. So it teaches, to act in concert, to act quickly, to respond, and so I didn't know any of that when I got in there, but I learned it. And the key thing that I learned was just at boot camp. Boot camp is just chaos initially. But you come together as a unit. And I discovered that just when you got it all down and it's no big deal, I mean, you can do it all, it's time to leave. And it reminds me of my dad before he died. He had problems with heart. He died at 74 years of age. But I remember him saying in those latter years, just when you start to get a handle on things, it's time to leave it. But that's true. That's true. God's preparing us for something a lot better. And so he's trying to get us to get a handle on it. Well, that's what boot camp is like. So that's a little bit of that.
Did you receive any specialized training? And if so, what?
Well, my specialized training after boot camp, yes, was Corps School. So when I graduated from boot camp, and during that time, you take tests, a whole bunch of tests. They're just kind of what can you do kind of tests. And I did fairly well in communications, and I guess I did well in my class or in graduating, but so when they gave me all these things that I could apply for or do, I applied for communications. And the other was dental tech. And I shouldn't have done dental tech. My brother was a dental tech, and he loved it. And it's clean work. You work with doctors, you work in a nice environment. And so I thought about dental tech. I thought that would be okay. But dental tech is so close to hospital corpsman. In fact, today it's all one. Dental and hospital corpsman, you take the training for both, to be a dental technician or to be a corpsman, and a corpsman can do all of that now. But at that time, they were separate. So I applied for the clean work, but I got the dirty work. I ended up getting to be a corpsman. So I knew when I was going home for 2 weeks that I would be a corpsman. And I thought, I've run away all this time, and everybody talks about, corpsman going to Vietnam, and that was 68, and so that was the worst Tet Offensive. It was a psychological blow, even though the Americans had the upper hand and had actually won all of that stuff that took place. The psychological blow of it came back. And that's when anarchy was in the streets and burning the flags and, and the draft cards and protesting. And so as a result of that, there was a protest about Vietnam. Come out of Vietnam, get out of there. And so I went in when they were protesting. I was going to Vietnam trying to help stabilize over there, and my own country was in anarchy. So anyway, so when I got home, I told mother, my mother was my just best prayer warrior, dear friend. And dad was great in a lot of ways, and I'm like him in a lot of ways, but he was very high tempered and he was very aggressive in his discipline. And so I feared my dad. I respected him greatly, but I feared him. And mother, she was at settling force. And so I told her that I was going to be a corpsman and that I would probably go to Vietnam. And she said, "Son, why in the world did you do that?" And I said, "Well, I ran from it as long as I could. And it seems to be that's where I'm going to be going. So I've accepted, I've embraced it. I will do whatever I need to do." So, but she thought I should just reject that completely and do something else. But if I rejected that school, and also I graduated from boot camp with a seaman, there's a second class seaman and there's a 1 stripe, 2 stripe, and 3 stripe, and I was a 3rd stripe seaman. So, and I got that from having however much college I had that qualified me for that. So, but it wasn't a big deal, not much money either. But anyway, so I said, if I do that, if I reject being a corpsman, then I'll have to strike for a rate. And to strike for a rate is to go to a ship, chip paint on the ship, work with bosun's mates, and just labor, do the labor on the ship, which wouldn't have been really bad. I could have done that. And I do envy the bosun's mates in some ways because they're very good coxswains or boat, driving boats. But they're also great knot tires. They are the coolest knot tires. And people that have been bosun's mate can do all kinds of fancy knot tying that's really an art, really good. But however, I became a corpsman.
Did you have a nickname?
My only nickname, most of the people are called by Edwards, by their name, by their last name. So everybody goes by the last name and you hardly remember the first name. And in Vietnam, you don't. And my nickname actually fit because I was called Doc. I was Doc Edwards. I am still called Doc Edwards by a lot of people. I do have a doctorate in ministry, and I was in ministry and I've taught at the college. So I was a doctor there. My son always said I was a doctor that couldn't do you any good. So because he was my son, he could be good for nothing. But at any rate, so I was just Doc Edwards and still am with Marines anywhere. The corpsmen are highly revered by the Marine Corps, much more so than by the Navy, because they're depended on. They're emotional and psychological support. They're considered healers. They might be considered good omen or a good talisman just to be with the Marines. A lot of times they just don't want to go out without you because you're that symbol of being there to help them. And so Doc is it, and it's still there. I'm called Doc by a lot of people. And it's okay. It fits okay.
Where did you serve?
I served first at Great Lakes in boot camp and then back to Great Lakes for my hospital corps school, which was 14 weeks. You learn how to make beds. I still help my wife make her. I helped my wife make her bed last night. She put clean sheets on. But I do it still like I did it in Navy, in corps school too, in the hospital. And I make them like they're made there. So, they're stretched tight. And over the back, and then you lift up the sides and do what you call miter corners. And so when it comes over, you've got this nice little crease down the side, and it looks good. And my wife says she can't ever get that done, but I do it in no time. And so I make my own bed, and I help her when she needs help on hers as well. So, but so hospital corps school, 14 weeks. and just everything about it. So I served there actually in training at the Great Lakes Hospital there in Great Lakes. I had some training on the wards there, and that's when I got to see some of the veterans coming back from Vietnam. Excuse me. Um, and got to see them and talk to them. They were young guys, Its average age was 18, 19. And so from there, then I went home for a couple weeks of vacation or leave, and then I went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, to their training there, and it was 5 weeks of training covering concealment, preparation for battle, learning how to get behind things that conceal you, learning to get behind things that can cover you and can block fire. I learned combat first aid, and we worked with plastic wounds, which were wounds that they were moulages that looked just like the wound. You see these Halloween masks that they have today that are all different kinds of. They did the same thing, except they looked like traumatic amputations and sucking chest wounds, broken jaws, compound fractures. And then a lot of them would have little tubes through them that looked like veins, and they would have dye that pumped it through, looked like blood, that would be in them. And so we did just over and over again practice combat first aid and with those plastic wounds. Then you learn how to give shots. You start with an orange, and then you get to each other. Then you learn how to take blood, and that was a little bit more difficult, but you just adjust to it. And so you go through this over and over and over again. So you have this theory that's there, and you have practiced it and practiced it. And it does become muscle memory and mind memory. You see these phenomenal athletes. I watched Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic play this tremendous tennis match in Cincinnati. Djokovic finally did win, but he had to fight every stretch of the way. But the guys were phenomenal. And so if you watch athletes, it might be gymnasts, it might be football players. They all do ballet in their own way. I was in judo for several years. Judo is ballet. I mean, and it's you're working the other person against each other. But in each of these cases, there is a peaking in preparation. And every athlete so he's working to this stage so that when he is in a major tournament, he is at his peak in performance, in muscle memory, in mind and body coordination. 5% of it is getting the body in shape, and 5% of it is getting the body in shape, and 95% of it is getting the mind and the body to work together, so that they actually everything is so precise. Well, the warrior is the same way. He is preparing and preparing and preparing for battle. He doesn't know what he's going to get into. It doesn't hit him until he's there. And he is green and in danger. His first month is the most dangerous time for him because he's learning what not to do and what to do. And the hardest thing for new guys is to get down, get behind, and to respond immediately and not later. You find people when they come back to the United States. When I came back to the United States, I was on the floor, on the ground, a lot of times at a backfire, at fireworks or something like that. You become from dull to instantaneous action. And so a person coming back from battle is not one to trifle with, is not one to joke with in any way, needs to be respected and appreciated. And I've had many laugh at me for doing that, but they don't understand. They haven't been there. Now, what was I talking about besides that? That was leading into.
You were telling me where you served.
Oh, where I served. Okay. Well, Camp Lejeune then got me ready. I was there for a year. I was there for 4 weeks. I went to Bethesda Naval Hospital, so I served there for not a long period of time, September to January, I believe it was. And then I went back to Camp Lejeune and was assigned to the 2nd Marine Division at Camp Lejeune, and I learned to play Marine. I went with the Marines and I became a Marine Corpsman. I was assigned to FMF and went to that. I had actually applied also for OR tech. I wanted to be an operating room tech to help doctors, and I don't have any problems with blood. I don't have any problems with anything that I have an older brother that will pass out at a shot. If he sees blood, he would pass out. He just could not handle it. On the other hand, I have never had a problem with that, but especially since Vietnam, where it affected most others, it didn't affect me in that way. But so I served Bethesda, and then I went back with the Marines. I made a med cruise with the Marines. I observed the Marines. I learned that the Marines weren't fighting other people or other things that fight each other. Their boot camp is so intense that, I mean, the worst person to confront is a boot right out of boot camp in the Marine Corps. He thinks he can fight a buzzsaw and come out on top, and they don't care. They don't mind getting beaten. But they'll sure get their licks in before they do. That's just the way they are. But so I learned to work with them, and I learned to love them. And it was a 4-month cruise that went to the Mediterranean. We went to Sardinia and played war. We went to Crete and played war. We went to Malta and had liberty at Malta. We had liberty in Toulon, France, and Livorno, Italy. And then we steamed, came back home. Most of them were 6 months, but that one was a 4-month. And so from there, then I came back and married my girlfriend, and we were friends all the way through college. She dated other guys. I dated other girls. We talked about our dates and what we liked and disliked about them. And one time from college, I took her home with me to visit with my family. My 16-year-old son or 15-year-old son said, "That's the one you're going to marry." I said, "No way. We've never kissed. We've never hugged. We just talk." He said, "You wait and see." So we were friends long before we got married. So when I got back, we got married. That was in the 14th of September of 69. And I think 69, 79, 89, 99, 09, 19, 21, 2, 3. So we'll be married 54 years in September. I tell everybody we've only had one fight in all those years. We still fight, but we just take a break every now and then. Give each other a chance. And iron sharpens iron, and we're both pretty sharp. So, but she's been a blessing. So I went home. After I got home, I went back to Camp Lejeune, and in January, I believe it was, and my wife came to camp. We got married, and then she came to Camp Lejeune, and we stayed in a little trailer that was just not big enough to whip a cat in. And then I got my orders to Vietnam, and so I had 40 days leave. I was in the greatest of shape, 165 pounds probably, and just really tough being with the Marines. And I had 40 days leave. I took all the leave I could get because I didn't know if I'd come back. I didn't. And when I asked my wife to marry me, I said, "I'm going to Vietnam, and I may not come back. And if I do, I could come back in any shape." I said, "Are you sure you want to marry me?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, we'll go on faith that I'll come back." And so we got married, had 40 days leave, and my family fed me like a fattening hog. I mean, all the good stuff that Mom could possibly make. And I gained 20 pounds in that 4 weeks. The worst thing that could happen to me. So I left for Vietnam. And when I left for Vietnam, I left on my wife's birthday. It was the Ides of March, and the 15th of March. And all the family went with me. My mom and dad and brother and sister that was there, they all went with me to the airport, and my wife. And it was the hardest thing I ever did. Now, it was the same time that other kids were going to Switzerland and to Europe and to Mexico and to Canada to get away from the draft. So many of them left, couldn't come back until Carter, I think, gave them amnesty for leaving. But I went that day, and it was the hardest thing I ever did. And it was a very sad day because it was her birthday. And so anyway, that's the last look I had was seeing them huddled together there crying as I got aboard the plane. And then that's when we flew to El Toro, California, overnighted at El Toro, and then from El Toro flew by TWA to Hawaii. The only time I've ever seen Hawaii is at that time, and we were gotten off the deplaned for a short while and stayed in a little place you couldn't go anywhere or see anything, and it was dark, so I didn't see anything. And then got back on and flew to Okinawa, and I was in Okinawa as an adjustment. It's the same kind of tropical heat. It's hot over there and everything. So I was there for about 6 days, I believe it was. And the Air Force Base was there. The big C-5s would fly over, the C-141s, jets, all of that. We had no liberty while we were there because anywhere there's military base, you have lots of bars and you have prostitutes and you've got everything there to take away. And they didn't want us to have anybody going AWOL from doing something like that. And so from there, then I went to Nam. And that was my last. Well, that was my duty station. After Nam, I was in the hospital for 4 months, recuperating. Back to Bethesda. After Bethesda, for I got back in October, and November, December, January, October, November, December, January. So 3 months I was in the hospital, recuperating, and then I went to Corpus Christi, Texas. And that's where I finished the Navy and got out in October of 1970. I got an early out, 3-month out, because I was going to go back to Cumberland, the University of Cumberland, and finish college, which is what I did. Those are the places that I served, with a little color added to it.
What were your duties in Vietnam?
My number one duty in Vietnam was a combat corpsman. And a combat corpsman looks after his men. There are 3 in a platoon, and a platoon there's 4 in a platoon. And you have a senior corpsman and then a corpsman for each squad. There are 3 squads of 14 men. So the senior corpsman usually is with the commander, the company commander or officer, the CO, commanding officer, and he's usually a lieutenant, sometimes a captain, sometimes a first lieutenant, but usually they're boot lieutenants. They're just young guys. All of them were younger than me when I was there, but I was an older man. So I was a combat corpsman. My job was to look after the men, and I tried to be the best corpsman that I could be. I didn't try to be a Marine. They're the ones that went to school for that and were very good at it. I was there to look after them, to patch their blisters, to fix their scrapes, to take care of them when they were falling from heat exhaustion. In fact, I was very short. Was 5'7". I am still, I think, I haven't measured myself in a while. I've probably shrunk an inch at least. But so it was 2 things I discovered there was that some of the smallest men become Marines to prove they're men. I have a great nephew. He's the one Marine in all of my 14 cousins and nephews and great nephews. But he's about 5'5" or 5'6", And he was a tough little Marine. He fought in Afghanistan, you know, still suffering from it. He had 4 of his men squad that was killed right in front of him, and he didn't get a scratch. And he has not gotten over it mentally still. Great guy, but suffers major PTSD, as some of his buddies still, you know. So, at any rate,
Would you tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences?
um, I have 2. The 2 most memorable are kind of tough, you know. Um, but I think I can do it. Okay. I arrived the 23rd of March, 1969. I was wounded the 23rd of September, 1969. The routine is generally either so slow that just nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. And then the opposite of that is extremely high adrenaline, intense high adrenaline, and and animal awareness. I mean, just being sensitive to everything. And so you have this going back and forth. This comes from patrols, ambushes, firefights, things that's just nothing's happening. All of a sudden it explodes in front of you. It's like a firework, actually. You light the firework and nothing happens. And it doesn't happen for a long time sometimes. And then all of a sudden it just blows up all over the place. That was kind of like it was. So what we developed was an animal kind of instinct where we were always on guard for anything to happen. And you live that way. And so I developed that mentality, which became a part of me for the 6 months I was in Nam, because much of that, if not most of it, was in the jungle or on patrol in very dangerous areas. So I say that to try to get to these 2 things I'm trying to tell you. I was a Christian before I went to Vietnam. And I had about 10 churches of people praying for me, and my mother was the chief warrior. So I could feel that to a great large descent. For some reason, or I had a kind of a sense of aura around me. I wanted to be the best Christian I could possibly be when I went to Vietnam. I didn't want to walk a fence. I didn't want to pretend. I didn't want to do anything but be as real as I could be to my men. And so I prayed for my men all the time that I was there. So in a lot of ways, I was almost a chaplain to my men, as well as being their doc. But when I first got there, this is leading up to these things. When I first got there, I was a brand new corpsman. Nobody knew me. In fact, there was a Doc Fisher who had been there, and he was so great that you would have thought he was divine. They just talked about how great he was and what a good doc he was. And because all I'd had was theory. I'd never seen a blood. I'd never fixed a blister. I hadn't done anything. And it made me feel very small. I knew I had the training. I just hadn't had the experience. And so, uh, but anyway, I walked in a hooch one evening, and the guys were playing Back Alley Bridge. It's a game that I don't even know what it is today, but it was a Marine Corps card game that was a heck of a lot of fun. And so these four Marines were sitting down. They had this light hanging down from the ceiling that was a bare bulb over them, and they were playing. And so when I went in, then they started grilling me, about who I was, where I was. It's the routine thing where you grill a new guy. A new guy is one that doesn't know anything. He comes in with clean, starched, pressed stuff. And these guys are in grungy, what we call salty clothes. And their boots are bleached out and have salt on them. Their clothes can sometimes have salt on them if they don't have it because you sweat so much. So as I walked in, somebody said, "Hey, Doc," uh, asked me where I was from and said, "Doc, do you smoke pot?" I said, "No, I don't smoke pot." They said, "Well, do you drink Jim Beam?" I said, "Nope, I don't drink Jim Beam or Jack Daniels. It makes you do things that you wish you hadn't done." "Well, do you screw the Sickalo girls?" And they were the prostitutes that went around from one place to another. They had a pimp who drove the bike, and they rode on behind, and they would go to a place and they would have sex with as many Marines as they could have sex with, and they would come back from time to time, and they took advantage of it. Most of them did. And I don't say most, but many. I said, "No, I don't do that either, because they leave you with diseases you wish you didn't have," and many did. They said, "Oh, well, what do you hear, Doc? You'll be doing all that. You'll be doing all that before you go home. That just happens." I said, "Take a good look, man. This is one man that's not going to be doing that. I have a precious wife at home, and I can wait till I get home." And from that, I got the title of preacher. So that was okay. They knew where I stood, and said, over the period of time, they would come to me in a lot of ways. But on one Sunday there, a chaplain flew in from the base out. He flew into our area. It was an isolated area, but it was Vietnamese NVA all around. And so it was Sunday morning, and I went to go to church. We had a great Methodist pastor there, Chaplain Scott, Stan B. Scott. He was a captain, and he never carried a weapon. He said, "If I need a weapon, there'll be one beside me." And because somebody would have been killed, he would get their weapon. But he did go on patrol with them. I don't think he went on ambush, but he did go on patrol with them a time or two. Wasn't supposed to do that. But anyway, so I went in, and Chaplain Scott said, "Doc, why don't you go see if you can round up some folks for church?" There wasn't anybody there, and he's getting ready to start. So I went from the hooch to hooch and started knocking on the doors and going in and inviting them to church to worship. He hadn't been there in a long time. We hadn't been a worship service. I went into this one hooch, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4 guys in there. They were playing rock music, and it was early rock, 60s rock. It wasn't any of the heavy stuff later on. But so they were playing rock music, and I went in and I said, "Men, Chaplain Scott is here, and we're setting up for worship, and I just wanted to invite you to worship." And they were smoking. They weren't smoking pot. I'm sure they could, but they weren't that day, because you can smell pot. It's super strong. So they were smoking cigarettes and playing the music. And I said, "Man, he's doesn't come often, and he's here, and this is a good time to go to worship." They said, "Doc, get out here and leave us alone. We're listening to some good sounds." I said, "Okay, man." So I went to worship. There were 5 servicemen and 1 officer there out of all those folks. And so afterwards, I don't know what made me do it, but I went back to that hooch. And they were playing the Iron Butterflies in the Gata de Vida. The guy, there's a 20-minute drum solo. I'm sorry. There's a 4-minute drum solo. It's a 20-minute song, 4-minute drum solo. And the man that was ahead of it, his father was a Methodist pastor, actually. And he became a musician and played the organ just tremendously. And it's a great piece of music. But now I always see it as a funeral fugue. That's the way I see it and still hear it. But so I went back to tell him about what he was talking about. I just shared his message with them. And they got very upset with me. And one young man who was the M79 man, M79 looks like a sawed-off shotgun. It shoots a shell about that big around. After 13 revolutions, it will explode. It won't explode before then. I don't know what the technology was, but he carried that. And to do that, you have to have a bag that carries rounds like that, and they can carry as much as 30 rounds of those, and they have HE, which is high explosive, Willie Peter, which is white phosphorus, and illumination rounds. So all those would be used in his bag of rounds. And Kinsel, in fact, I have a picture of him on the practice field firing as M79. And so as I went back in and started sharing with him, Kinsel finally got very frustrated with me, and he came over and said, "Doc, won't you just leave us alone? We are listening to good sounds, and it was good sound." But I said, "Kinsel, we go on ambush, we go on patrol, we go on firefights, and somebody doesn't come back. Do you ever think about eternity in your life?" He looked at me just very sternly and straight and said, "Doc, I'm 19 years old. I've got a lot of wild oats to sow, and I'll cross that bridge when I come to it." I mean, that was very final, and I walked out and regret that I did not ever go back in. So 3 weeks later then, or so, not long, we were choppered to what we call Barrier Island. It was a strip of island a mile or so long. The Americal Division, which is made up of the Aussies, Australian, and Army, came in at some time previously, and the NVA had come in there and dug a whole little city underground. So they had what they call spider holes, where they could slip in and go underground and have all their livelihood, and they could disappear and you wouldn't even see them. But outside, they would have little gardens. They had wind dikes that were 10 feet high. That's about as high as a ceiling, not quite as high, but 10 feet high. And they were big, and they were wind breaks to break the wind. And then behind those, they would have little yards and gardens, and they would live lives out there. And then the men would shoot and sniper and everything there. Well, among those were snipers as well. So, but we were on that island. We'd been transported to that island. They'd taken heavy casualties, and so the company left there, and we went in, and so the company, we were fan firing, and fan firing is where we were walking in a line, and the ones in the line were fan firing with M60s or AK, not AKs, but M16s. And I remember walking through a clearing, thought I saw a man on a wind dike, and he was it was a bush, but it was like a man. But as I came through this clearing, this sandy stuff, I heard this right in front of me, and the sand kicked up. I didn't hear him shoot, but because they were firing in the front. And then another lad behind me was Ken Tanaka, Doc Tanaka. He was a Japanese corpsman he's from San Diego. He's from LA, from Los Angeles. And so he came through and was telling me what he saw and felt. And I said, I did the same thing, So they were there firing at us. And a little bit later, as we went on, I heard firing and then major explosions. And then I heard corpsmen up from a sister squad. And I thought, well, they got a corpsman there, so he'll take care of him. But it never happened. So when I ran over to it, and they had hit, excuse me, they had hit Kinsel's bag of rounds, and it just exploded all over the place and killed him. He didn't look real. He looked like a deflated mannequin. And then and behind him was a young man named Joe Norwood, who'd been in country 6 weeks, but he'd only been with us about 2 or 3. And I just had got to know him just a little bit. And I really liked him. He was from Texas. And, but a shard from that had hit him in the temple. And I went to him and worked for an hour to save him. The choppers came but would not come down because it was a hot zone. And he died in my arms. And we had been through a lot of intense stuff for a long time, and I broke down and cried. I remembered immediately Kinsel's last words to me. And and I just wept, and I was just, and you don't do that that shows a vulnerability. It also takes your mind off the intensity of the danger at the time, and you can endanger others, but I couldn't help it. And so I broke down and cried, and I said, God, why? These men are the best specimens that we have to offer, and they just seemed like worthless sacrifices. And and Babyface, who's in the book and probably one of still the dearest friend, we still love each other. We always kiss each other on the cheek when we see each other. Precious. He lives in Michigan. But so Babyface came over and consoled me. And God didn't answer that question then, but he did answer it later. So when Joe died in my arms and I cried, that was the pivotal point, probably even of my post-traumatic stress, because it wasn't a big wound. It wasn't bad and bloody. It was just a little thing in his temple. There was just a little trickle of blood. And when I went to the psychiatrist after I got back for post-traumatic stress, he was a great, great doctor in Knoxville. He has since passed away. But he was telling me about people with post-traumatic stress. It's not generally on a whole lot of things that they focus on. It's one thing, one simple thing. And when I told him that was what was my problem, and it has always been and has been there until I got the book written. Getting the book written helped me to kind of put it aside. So this brings it up a little bit. But so at any rate, that was the key to that. And what God told me later was, life and death is not yours to give or to take. It is mine. Yours is to live for me, is to tell about me, and let me take care of these other things and other people. But and that helped. But the 2 passages of scripture that I really hung on there was the first first one for me was Isaiah 53, I believe it's 10, where Isaiah goes into the temple and he sees God high and lifted up and holy, and he comes in to mourn and grieve because Uzziah had died and he was a favorite. He loved him. But God instead confronts him with his holiness, and in God's holiness, Isaiah sees his sinfulness, and he says, woe or cursed am I am a man of unclean lips. I live among a people of unclean lips. And so the angel goes over to the fire and takes tongs off the fire and touches his lips, symbolizing the cleansing and the holiness of his lips. And he says to him, that you are, whom shall I send and who will go for us? Who will go for us to tell my message? And Isaiah says, here am I, Lord, send me. And those words I could not get out of my mind. And the second was Isaiah 10, not Isaiah, but Matthew 10:27. Jesus said to his disciples, don't be afraid of him who can kill your body and soul. That's nothing. But fear him who can take body and soul and destroy all in hell. So the fear, which is reverence and awe, is for God and not anything that man can do or any other thing that can happen to you. And so that stuck with me. The other, I've said all that to say that one story. And the last story is when I was wounded and we'd been in the jungle for a long time. We had many cases of malaria and jungle rot. I had two men with malaria. One was 105, the other one was 104 degrees. They were both squad leaders. And so I told the commanding officer that these men must be evacuated immediately or they will die, go into convulsions and die. And they were right close to it. So he didn't know what to do. He lost so much of his men. We were all just strung out real bad and from fatigue and battle weary and being in the jungle for so long. And so he said, I'll call the colonel. He called the colonel, and the colonel flew in a Huey, which is a smaller chopper, and sat down. And so he called. He and the colonel were conferring, and we had just come all day, from the top of a high mountain down into the low valley and back up to this mountain. But this mountain wasn't where we were supposed to be. We should have been on a higher one. And the other mountains around us were a third higher than where we were. And it was a dangerous place to be. And so, but anyway, the colonel and they were coming in. I had not eaten all day. And so I had 2 boxes of C rations. I was a hoarder. I had sacrifice syndrome and didn't know it at the time. Sacrifice syndrome is where the corpsman will sacrifice his stuff for his men. He will hoard it and keep it and have it when it is needed for them. And so I had this food, not so much for myself, but I hadn't eaten anything except I always carried, they had a little thing of peanut butter and a little thing of jelly and a little packet of crackers. And I would carry those here in my breast pocket of my jungle shirt. And then when I have a break, that's what I eat. And that's pretty much what I lived on. So I hadn't eaten anything. I broke all these out and had just eaten 2 of those. And I was reading my Bible at the time. And one of the Marines came over to me. But before that happened, I think we had 5 rounds that came off of the west side of us down onto our mountain, but on the other side. And they all hit on the other side. And nobody did anything. We didn't dig in. We ignored it as if it was nothing. And so I was reading my Bible. One of the Marines came over to me and said, Doc, we're going to go out on patrol tonight. Would you go with us? And I did not want to go. It was a bad place and a bad place to go. And I said, don't you have anybody to go with you? That's a terrible thing to say. And he said, no, Doc, we don't. But that's okay. You get rest and we'll be okay without you. I said, no, absolutely not. When you're ready, you come back and get me. I'll be there. I'll be ready. Well, between that time, he never came back. And the reason was after the lieutenant and the colonel conferred, then I was to get everybody to be medevac that could not force march for 3 days. So I had a lot of jungle rot, and jungle rot is where the disease, their skin is, I don't know what happens, but it sloughs up like a blister, and it will just slough off, and it continues to spread and spread. And so I had one young man, I've got a picture of him actually in one of my pictures. He's Doc Tanaka, the Japanese lad. He had jungle rot so bad I had to medevac him. His whole arm was just nothing but where the skin had sloughed off. But so I got those ready, and I had these two men that had had malaria, and I got those medevac. And so a big CH-46 came in, and a CH-46 has the two. It's a big one, and it has two propellers, rotors. And it was the trash of the Army. Marines always got the trash of the Army. We did more with less. However, so as this thing came in, and they just lumber in, they just shake, and they're not the best, but they work. So we got all these men aboard, and then he just spiraled up, and out, has to make circles to gain altitude. Right after he left, they started letting the mortars go. It'd be a katoop, and then you'd start screaming and coming in. And so they would fire, and then they would elevate it. It comes out of a tube, and it sits on this tube, and it's elevated. And they have these things here that can elevate it and make it go higher or lower. And so they would fire one and then elevate it and fire another and elevate it. And they walked 22 of those across the hill. And there were 20-something of us that were wounded. I was hit with the last two because I was on the far side of the hill. I told my kid brother when I went to Vietnam, Don, I said, if you hear that I'll be wounded, you'll know that I was wounded in the back because I'll be running for help. Of course, I said that as a joke. But we didn't dig in, so I was hugging the ground, and they landed just a little bit below me. They have a 25-meter killing range and a 50-meter wounding range, so I don't know how far down, but they were below. And so the first one got me in the head and the arm, a shrapnel from it, and the second one got me in the thorax, in the back, and the butt. And so I was critical. I couldn't go to them. I wasn't out. They could hear me. I could hear them. I couldn't see. It felt like I was hitting the head with a hammer, and I was hurting pretty bad. And so I just lay there, and I heard them yelling for me, Doc Edwards. And then finally, Babyface arrived, and Red arrived, Red Phillips, and so they came to me, and I was bleeding like a stuck hog because I was bleeding out of my head and my arms that had been hit. My back was hit, and took a big chunk out of my butt. And so they thought I was going to die. You don't give morphine for a head wound or a stomach wound, either one. And so finally the senior corpsman, Doc Pellegrini, came over, and Red said to him, he needs some morphine. And because they thought I was going to die, they gave me the morphine anyway. Morphine gives you pinpoint pupils, so you can't tell if there's a concussion or anything. And morphine also dries up the salivary glands and the glands that lubricate the intestines and the stomach area. And so I had both of those wounds. But so they gave me that, and as a result, they stripped all my clothes off of me except my boots. I had boots on that were just about new. I had just gotten them broken in by walking about a half a mile in a creek, and they just fit like gloves after that. But I had this crazy thing from watching all these Westerns when I was a kid, that the dying cowboy didn't want to die with his boots on. So take my boots off. I could not get that out of my mind, and I made them take my boots off. They said, Doc, you'll be sorry. You could take these home with you or whatever. So they took my boots off. And on the way to the chopper, before the chopper came, I said to the guys, they said, Doc, the chopper's coming. He'll be here anytime. I said, men, before the chopper gets here, I'd like to pray together. If it's all right, would you guys join hands with me? These big, tough Marines. And they said yes. We'll do it, Doc. So I said, Lord, you know, we've been through this valley of death for a long time, and I'm going home. But these men have to go the rest of the way through the valley of death. Would you please go with them and bring them home? And so they put me in my just a poncho to carry me to the chopper. And so as they were carrying me, somebody let his corner down, and I started dragging on the bushes. And one of these Marines cussed real big and said, "Get that up! Stop dragging Doc on the ground." And I told him, I guess I said, but he told me later, said, Doc, when I said that, you said, now you shouldn't be talking like that. So they got me over to the chopper and got me in. By that time, the morphine was starting to take place, to take effect. And when I got in there, I was, because there were two others in there, and I called to them, but nobody answered. So I didn't know if they were dead or not. As far as I know, they were alive, but I don't know who they were. And then I just went into a kind of a pool of black. And the next time I woke up, I was at the 1st Med Battalion. They were taking me over rough ground to this tent hospital. And this angelic creature was holding a bottle of fluid go into me because I lost a lot of blood. And he was a corpsman, an army medic, actually. And he said, Doc, don't worry. He said, you'll be okay. We're going to take care of you, and we'll send you on home. And so then after that, they had medevaced me over to the, that was 1st Med Battalion. Then I went to the hospital ship repos and was there. And when I came to, they had gone and done surgery on me and taken out my transverse colon and sewed me back up again and patched my holes and stuff, and I was hurting all over from more than anything else. But and this little heavy-set nurse with a Dutch boy haircut was firm and tough, and I was very contentious. I had malaria. When I came out of that, I had malaria, and so I was suffering just with a whole bunch of stuff. She was a God-sent angel. She didn't. She was so tough, though, but she got me through it. So that's a memory of the last part of that. And then from there, I was steamed by the hospital ship over to Clark Air Force Base. So I went over to the Philippines, got on a C-141, came back to Bethesda, Maryland, and arrived home on the 8th of October. It was in full autumn splendor. It was so beautiful. If I could have gotten out of the stretcher, I would have kissed the ground. But it was good to be home.
Would you tell me about some of the special people you met?
Well, I guess I have to say, my unit that I was with were special, but the special ones of my unit was Robert Joseph Wiggin, and he was babyface. He came to Vietnam at 18. He reminded me of my kid brother, except he was had black hair and chocolate brown eyes and rosy cheeks, and had a string of pearl smile, just a great smile. And the other one was Red Phillips. And Red was a scrawny, freckle-faced, red-headed lad. And both of these guys were probably PFCs or E3s or 4s, something like that. They were not E4s. They were they were E3. So it's a private first class. I think the private, a recruit, private, and first class or something like that. But anyway, a lance corporal. They were lance corporals. That's what they were. And so Red, he was from Beaumont, Texas, had a great sense of humor. He could handle anything with humor, which was great. It was outstanding. And Babyface, he was just a nice Michigan lad. His dad was a plumber. He had three brothers at home. And he had come to Nam at 18, and that's when I met him. I just loved the fellowship with those guys. And Ken Tanaka. Ken Tanaka was a Japanese corpsman. We were in the same squad in one area. There were two of us in that squad, and in that company, rather that platoon. There are three squads in a platoon. So there were only two of us. We were down to just two for some reason or another. But so one would go on ambush at night. The next one would go on the morning patrol, and then the next night the other would be on ambush. So we took turns. But every night before going out on ambush, we had this ritual of drinking hot chocolate. We'd take sterno tabs, or we would take C4, which is an explosive, but it burned hotter than sterno. And so from the engineers, you could get chunks of C4. And so when I could do that, I would. But anyway, we would have this little fire. We had this quart juice can and with a bale on it, and that we put a bale on, and we would fix hot chocolate. And what we would do is collect hot chocolate or collect chocolate from other people's sea rations, and then we would have this ritual of fixing hot chocolate. And the hot chocolate was done with that and water and creamer. That's what we made our hot chocolate from. I tried that when I got back. It was the nastiest stuff. But over there, the smell of it, everything, and we would talk about home. We would talk about family. We would talk about his girlfriend, my wife. And that was so meaningful, and it stuck so much. But we did that for I don't know how long. It was just a week or two, probably, because we would change places. But anyway, those three men. Tanaka went back to L.A. I didn't find him for many, many years. I tried to find him in the phone book. Same way with Babyface. I couldn't find him. And Red. And then I finally found him. I started searching for him, and I found a mutual friend in L.A. and San Diego. He was in San Diego, and he was a ferret. He would go. He was so good on the internet, and I was totally ignorant. And he found Babyface. He found Red Phillips for me, and then he found Babyface for me. You know, these guys all over, and he's just. So we have gotten together. I just remembered there was one picture I did not bring, but so once we was able to find everybody, then we started establishing this Vietnam reunion, and it started in 2000. So first time I went to L.A. to that first reunion, it was a First Marine Division and an India Company. India Company is part of the First Marine Division, and it's stationed at San Diego in California. And so the seventh Marines is there as well. So, but at any rate, so we were able to get together, and we still meet. I missed this last one. Just when I was supposed to go, I got sick and just had a high fever and couldn't make it. It was in Florida. Wouldn't have been far. And Babyface, though he didn't go, was in Florida also. He has a summer home in Florida. And when he goes from Michigan to Florida, usually in the fall of the year, he usually stops by for a pit stop, and we'll have a meal or visit, or just then I'll usually have some jellies and jams or anything for him as he goes through. I make apple butter, so I make sure that he has plenty of apple butter when he heads south. But so those are the special people. There have been a lot, a lot of folks that I've met, and but those are the ones that have stayed with me the most. And of course, my wife and my family. That's been very special.
Were you awarded any medals?
I have certainly the first one you get in boot camp or right out of boot camp in your first uniform is the National Defense, and it's a red with little yellow, fine yellow stripes in it, and it's a medallion, and it's got an eagle on the front on it, and so that's the first one you get. Um, and I think all the others came after that, I guess, because what I have from there on is Vietnam medals. Um, and the Vietnam medals that I have is the Vietnam Service Medal, and it is orange with red stripes or gold with red stripes. Uh, and it's a medallion also with the insignia of Vietnam on it. There's the Vietnam Campaign Medal. Mine has 1961 on it, and the medal would read from 1961 probably to 1975, I'm thinking. Um, and that's for the campaign of how long or when you served from that time on. And that is green and white striped. And then I have the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry, which is crossed swords with the dragon down through the front of it. And it's kind of an impressive looking bronze medal. Uh, so mine's the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry with palm, and that is an individual award. They do it individual unit, and then the other one is a Purple Heart for being wounded. Uh, and then there was a badge that was kind of late. I guess it came after. It seems to me like, and it is I think it's a red, white, and blue ribbon. There was not a medal made for it. However, recently they have made a badge um, that, or a metal badge that is wings and something else. I'm not sure what all that is on it. That identifies a person who is a Fleet Marine Force Marine who has had combat. It's a combat medal as well.
Would you tell me about the day your service ended?
The day my service ended um, was in November. I'm sorry, October. I think it was probably about the last of October that I was able to get an early out because I had applied to college and would be going back to finish all my mistakes that I'd made before going to college and trying to finish it. And as a result, um, I was able to get an early out, and so instead of getting out in January, I got out in October. A couple days before that, I had a picture made of myself in my uniform, um, and then that day was just a matter of getting everything done. I was in Corpus Christi, Texas. That's where it was. I had been there for the last year working at the dispensary there. I'd gotten in a lot of good surf fishing, ate some great seafood, um, became familiar with the Corpus Christi wind that blows all the time. But a very beautiful place. We had been members of a little Baptist church called the Flower Bluff Baptist Church. We had gotten it very close. I worked with the youth there during that time, and I loved them like kids. They called themselves the Vickites because they would come over to our little duplex apartment all the time and hang out, and we just did a lot of stuff together. It was a precious time there. We met some wonderful people there at the church, the pastor, the kids. And so when we got everything done and drove off the base and started heading back, we cried from Corpus Christi to Houston, mourning the leaving of this precious family that we had found in Corpus Christi. And then we kind of got ourselves together as we headed on from Houston to home in Ohio.
What did you do after your military service?
After military, we came back to Williamsburg, Kentucky, and to start college in January. So we came right back, got a little bitty apartment over the RC Coca-Cola company there at the time. It was a one-bedroom, little dinky place. We didn't have anything. I was supposed to have money being paid to me for college from the military, and it had not started. I was supposed to get some, I guess, Social Security, or I think I was supposed to get maybe money for, yeah, I was supposed to get VA money also for going to college for money. None of that showed up. So when we got to there to Williamsburg in that little apartment, we had a VW Beetle. That's what we had, with a 1966 VW Beetle with one of those roofs that say back. The kids in Texas loved that little Beetle. I remember them putting a Christmas tree in it one time just for jokes. But so when we got back, I applied for all that stuff. I went and got ready for school. We had no money. We couldn't buy food. And finally, I asked my sister if I could get $20 from her. She lived over in Dandridge, Tennessee. So I borrowed $20 off my sister, and we ate pork and beans, for a little bit. And then Christmas, we didn't have anything right at Christmas time. It took a long time for some reason or other. And my brother, another brother, came by to see us. But before that, it was a little bit before Christmas, I guess, sometime. And I went rabbit hunting with a friend, and saw this beautiful little Christmas tree. It was just a perfect little Christmas tree. And so I didn't have anything to cut it with, so I shot it off at the base with a 12 gauge shotgun. When I shot it off to the base, it just fell flat back, all the way flat. So when I got it and picked it up, it was only the front side of it. There was nothing on the back of it at all. So I took it home. Our apartment was so little, it was perfect. So we just put it up against the wall. When my brother came to stop and see us, I think he bought us some groceries, but he also bought some lights to put on that little Christmas tree. So my wife and I, my brother and his family, and we had a cat named Pete. We picked him up. One of the kids in Corpus Christi gave us the little cat named Sweet Pea. They thought it was a female. Beautiful cat. It was black with a white collar and a black mustache. Looks like it was in tuxedo and white paws. We named him Sweet Pea, but later on we found out he was a Pete, so we changed his name to Pete. And then I got enrolled back at Cumberland, and it was great to be back. My grades were much better. I graduated a year and a half later, I think. I had changed a lot, and that experience was the benchmark of the rest of my life, big time.
How did your military experiences affect your life?
It's affected it in every way. It's affected me positively about wanting to carry on and do, I think about the men who died. Two died in my arms. They were just precious. Had great conversations with them about home and school and future, and they don't have that. And so that was always an encouragement to me. At the same time, I didn't have the anger that other people had. A lot of people were super angry, and that's part of PTSD, but it's never been a part of me. But mine, it's hard to express my own, but the best way I can express it is what is generally accepted in most of them, is that we all have difficulty completing projects. We start things, and when we get into them, they don't mean anything. So we leave them, or it takes us a long time to do that. My book is a good example. That was one project that I had 3 goals in life that I could think of. I probably should have set them higher, but these were not that easy to attain for me. One was to get a college education. My mother's hopes for me and my mother's dreams of getting her own education that were thwarted by snow and lack of transportation and weather and youth. And she always wanted to be a teacher. And I could never get that out of my mind. And then a sister-in-law of mine, my Japanese sister-in-law, Hiroko Tanamachi Edwards, she is 88 now, and but when I was flunking out at the University of Houston and staying with them, and decided to go home and quit because I was flunking and I was a failure, she said to me, "Now, Vic, you can go home and go back to the farm, and you'll do well. Whatever you do, I know you will do well. But an education is something that can never be taken away from you. It's appreciation of life. It's your cross-cultural experience. It's all the things that you gain from it that will give you tools to carry on in life. Nobody can take it away from you." Those never left me. I tell Hero that every time I see her, that I love her and she's my other warrior in my life. My brother passed away 10 years ago. Wow. And, so God has blessed tremendously blessed me. And so from that, when I came back and finished college, then I went on to seminary. I left out that while I was in Vietnam, that I did surrender to ministry on one of those mountaintops where there was nothing but darkness. And I remember telling you that I hadn't, and when I prayed to the guys about, before I was wounded, about God going with me, I knew the Marines had a saying in Vietnam, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for I'm the meanest MF in the valley." And I knew the whole psalm, and the whole psalm meant a lot to me. And so I knew that the Lord was leading me through the valley and that He was going with me. And if I made it home, it's because He did so. And so He did. He brought me home. So on a mountaintop at midnight, in the darkest of dark, I surrendered. He proved to me that He was with me. And I said, "If you will go with me, because I'm scared to death to do something like that, I'll go where you want me to go." So when I came back and I finished college, I went on to seminary at Southwestern in Fort Worth, Texas, and was there for 2 years. My dad got very ill with heart problems, and I came home, and he had a heart attack. We came home, and he had a heart attack while I was there, and I happened to get him to the hospital immediately and saved his life, and he lived several more years. But in the meantime, I got out of seminary, and I taught high school for a couple of years. And then I went back and finished seminary and was in ministry. I pastored, and then I taught at the University of the Cumberlands for 8 years. Then I worked with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association at Cumberland for 11 years. And then I left there, taught 2 more years of high school. And then I went to work with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. I did that for 8 years in international ministry. So I traveled over Europe and Asia and the Caribbean in international ministry. So, just the Lord has taken me on a journey. If they'd have told me when I was a snotty-nosed, poor 10-year-old kid that I would do that, I would have thought he was crazy. But God is awesome. And I'm 81 on the 5th of September. He's been such an awesome God to me. And He's let me live in one of the most beautiful places in the world that I have ever been. And it's in the very same country that my daddy was born in. I had to go around the world to really appreciate what it is here, and it is precious.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view this interview?
I would say to people who enter, if you want to get on a journey in life that is amazing and constantly serendipity, that make Jesus Christ your Lord and Savior. He will never leave you, never forsake you. He'll be your point man. He'll be your tail end Charlie. He will be your left oblique protection and your right oblique protection. I know I did left and right, but it's left and right. But anyway, you just never know. And if you're faithful, you cannot outlove him, outgive him, outserve him. And he will lead you on a journey that will please you. And he will bring you joy. He will bring you friends. But you will go through hardship and pain and grief and loss. But you never go alone. Jesus said, I will never leave you or forsake you. I'll go with you to the end of the age till he calls me home, whenever that is. And so, and to college young kids, you know, I'm an encourager. That's what I am. That's one of the gifts that I have, is an encourager. And I especially like to encourage young men who are young, or kid, whoever I am. First of all, also, don't ever forget when you were 5 years old. Don't forget when you were 13 and 14 and rebellious and indifferent. Don't forget when you were a college student and thought you were a man and or a woman and you could do your own thing. Always remember that so that you can relate to others who are there. And then be respectful of elders and seek counsel. Always seek counsel and then make your decision. But your elders are history books that are walking around with awesome stories to tell about things that you read in the book, but they're so different and twisted today that you need to be around real people. And then hang out with the finest people that you can find to hang out with, who will challenge your character and your integrity, who will support you and love you and encourage you. And don't hang around people who are always down in the mouth and pessimistic and agnostic or whatever it is about life. Live life, you know. The Bible says God is the God of the living. If you belong to God, you're living and you will always be living. My skin is starting to wrinkle. My stash droops a little bit. That's my biggest compliment these days, you know. But I've groomed it since 1969. I grew it in Vietnam. But so young people, I just last January, a young man from Cumberland after school in January, so he dropped out and he went in the Marine Corps. And he was supposed to be coming back, but I bought him a Bible to take with him, and I didn't get it to him in time, and he left. Last Sunday, he came back to church. He's in the reserves, and so he's gone to boot camp. He's coming back to school, and I said, I've got a Bible for you that's been waiting on you since you left. So this Sunday, I'm going to give it. I didn't have it with me, but I will have it Sunday. And so he's excited to get it. So just be an encourager. Be liberal with your love and encouragement. You have no idea what a kind word or a word of encouragement can be to somebody. And if you're that somebody that's kind of drifting a little bit, find somebody that's positive. Find somebody that's loving life and pick their brains. And then what are your gifts and talents? God's given you gifts and talents, and when he made you, he threw away the mold. There's not another like you. You are special and precious. And so, and when people tell you you can't, I grew up where professors and teachers, thought you were just there and they were to pour information into you, but you could not ask questions, and to do so would get their retort of trying to make you look silly and like a fool. Don't let people be that way with you. When people tell you you can't do anything, just smile on them. they're not your judge, and they're not the ones that are there. They're just there for their selfish reasons or for whatever indifferent reason they're doing that with you. Just you know, and sometimes you have to decide on your own, this is what I want. And even if I fail, then that's okay. I've tried it. But you only have one life to live. And 70, which is 70 years. God's been gracious, and He's let us and find out all these great medications and technologies. I tell people that I've taken so many pills that they won't have to embalm me because I'm already full of whatever minerals is keeping me going for heart and blood pressure and diabetes and all these post-traumatic stress, all these things that they can be baggage. But find a good friend, one that you can cuss the cat without getting fur in your mouth and they won't think you're crazy or perverted or stupid or whatever. Somebody that loves you because they know you, and get honest feedback. And then, life is a battle. It is full of hardship and pain. The Bible says that man's years are few and full of trouble, but that's true. Now, why God permits all of this, I don't understand, or how much longer He's going to do it, but I do know that His Son, Jesus Christ, in the power of His Spirit, can go with you and take you with Him for eternity. It's worth it all. It's worth it all. Would that be okay to say?
Is there anything you feel we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
The only thing I can think about is that if you have a veteran in your life who is combat experienced, that you be patient with them, that you be kind to them, and give them respect that is due, mainly because they still think they don't fit in. They still think they're not quite acceptable. It's just, that's the way it is. But if you become comfortable with yourself, then you can let other people be comfortable with you in their presence. Try to make other people feel comfortable in your presence. Try not to be judgmental and condescending. It's infantile. It's like kids. Try to understand people. Read the nature, study the nature of people. Know that anybody can do anything, evil or good, and so be the best you can be. Treat yourself kind, respect yourself, and then have respect for others. But veterans of all, you'll find us sometimes shifty, sometimes alone, sometimes anxious. We do have a problem with anxiety. Sometimes it hits and we don't know why it hits. But we learn to live with ourselves if we study ourselves. But so just respect your veterans. And respect your veterans as far as parents and uncles and elders who have a lot of wisdom, And if they give you bad advice, just take it as counsel and then find others. But my experience in education was, of course, but then I grew up in a very poor family with 9 kids, and it was very difficult to find that I was really somebody that could do something, because I equated poverty with being stupid, and that is absolutely not the case. But it took me a while. But I never quit, and that's another thing. I really like what Winston Churchill said to the class of boys when he got up and said, never give up, never give up, never, never, never give up. And that's the thing. If you watch these athletes, you look at them, they go with reckless abandon, and they never give up. They struggle to get across the finish line, across the goal post, across the tennis net. They don't quit. Why should you quit? I don't want to rust out. I would much rather wear out or burn out. God bless you. I hope you get a blessing out of this and maybe a little wisdom. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you.